You are listening to a Difference for One podcast, episode number 7.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Nicole.
I'm Charisse. And I'm Cami.
We are the English sisters.
We come together to share life-changing methods of improvement through a variety of topics.
We hope that above all, these discussions will help you feel that Jesus Christ is making a difference for you, the one.
And we also hope that our podcast will inspire you to find simple ways that you can make a difference for one. Hi friends, Nicole here, and today I'm with my good friend Charity Jeffs. Charity is a doula and an evidence-based birth instructor, and she's been doing this since 2017. In fact, I was her first client when I was pregnant with my second baby, Kate. So we wanted to talk to you all a little bit about what a doula does and my experience with her as my doula, and also how some of the thinking techniques that doulas advise their clients to use can help you in your day-to-day living.
We'll be back after this quick break with a message from our sponsors.
So Charity, let's start off with why you wanted to become a doula.
Well, hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Okay, so I have 5 children, and I felt really well supported in my births. My husband was a really good support and a coach, and my mom was at all of my births. As I started to talk to other women, that's what we do, right? We talk about labor stories. And as I started to talk to other women, even women with very loving, kind, supportive husbands, didn't all have the same experience. Their husbands were maybe uncomfortable in the birth room, or they just didn't offer them the kind of support that they needed, or whatever.
Didn't know what they could or should be doing.
Exactly. And so I just felt sad that not every woman had as good of experience as I did. Now, I've learned a lot since then, and I look back and I think about, like, there's ways that my experiences could have been improved as well.
Yeah.
But I just wanted women to feel that positive experience about birth. I didn't want it just to be something that they had to get through to be able to have the prize of the baby.
And something you dread.
Right. And I felt like there's a lot of that in our culture and society, that birth is just this horrible thing that we have to go through, but we get a really great prize at the end.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that way. And I wanted to help other women see the beauty of birth and the power and strength of their own bodies and their minds that could help bring that about.
And didn't you also say that because you had 2 VBACs, VBAC, for anybody listening who doesn't know, means vaginal birth after a cesarean or a C-section. So you wanted women to know that they can do it and it's not the impossible.
Yes. So on my 3rd, I had a cesarean because she was transverse or sideways and my water broke. So then after that, I wanted to have a vaginal birth, and I was a good candidate. And so I was able to have 2 vaginal births after that cesarean. And yes, I wanted to help encourage women who wanted to have a vaginal birth. In the medical community, the pendulum has kind of swung back and forth about vaginal births after cesarean. If you look over time, it's been encouraged and then it's been discouraged and kind of everywhere in between. And as I started to hear more and more women who are like, oh yeah, I'm just having another C-section because I already had one, I started to realize that, there was maybe a room for a lot of support for women who wanted to have, or at least attempt, a vaginal birth after a cesarean.
And I think room for education about that too, about how it can be possible or what the risks are, right?
Right, because as there are a lot of things in the medical community, there are a lot of OBs that just don't want to take on that risk. And so they kind of have a blanket statement of they don't do VBACs or they don't allow their patients to attempt that. But if women are more educated about their options, then they can find the right provider who's willing to look at their situation individually and determine whether or not it's a safe risk to take.
Yeah. So can you tell our listeners what someone can expect when they hire a doula?
Sure. So if somebody decides that they want to hire a doula, then they would first find multiple doulas to interview. And so I offer a free consultation for somebody who's interested in a doula, and then we just get to know each other and find out if we'd be a good fit for each other based on our feelings about birth and just personalities. So then if somebody were to choose to hire me, they would sign a contract, pay a retainer fee, and then the full payment would be due just right before the due date. Then once that contract is signed, I'm their support. They can call me, they can text me, they can email me about questions that they have or tell me about their appointments and ask me for help to find more information, whether I know it already or I can lead them to a source that they can find more information about questions that they have, or just educate themselves, help direct them to childbirth education in the area or other resources that they might need. And then at about 34 weeks in the pregnancy, I would meet with the pregnant person and their support person. So whether that's a husband and wife or whoever that is, that will be the main support person with the expecting mom. Or if she doesn't have one, then I just meet with her. Then we would talk about her birth preferences and what she is looking to have happen at her birth. We talk about like what's the ideal. If you could have everything go exactly the way you wanted, how would that be? And then we talk about, okay, well, if that doesn't happen, knowing that birth is unpredictable, which of those things are most important to you? And how can I help you achieve those things? What kind of comfort measures can I help you with? And I usually give them at that visit, I give them some things to practice. I give them relaxation techniques to practice and comfort measures to practice and positions to practice. So then I would go back in a week or two and we would then talk about more specifics like, okay, which of these comfort measures really worked for you? Which of these positions did you like for finding comfort and some of those kinds of things? And then we talk about specific birth preferences and come up with a birth plan, whether or not it's an official birth plan that's handed to the healthcare providers when you go in, or if it's just something that you and your partner work through. I encourage people to at least come up with something that they either have for just themselves or.
And then you know what they're expecting or wanting too, so you can help them achieve it as closely as possible, right?
Right. So then we're all on the same page because really I'm just another member of their birth support team.
So I already know this, but can you tell the listeners, how are you different from a midwife?
Okay, so I don't do anything medical. I don't do anything clinical. I can't even take blood pressure. I don't check the cervix. So I provide physical and emotional support to a woman during pregnancy and labor and postpartum, but I don't provide anything clinical. So that's the difference.
Yeah.
I guess then talking about what a doula does, and we didn't talk about the main part, which is at the birth. Whenever the woman wants me to join her in labor, whether that's at her home or in the hospital, then I would join her and help her put into practice her plan, work through contractions, find comfortable positions to be in, comfort measures. And one of the things that I really like to emphasize that I do is that I help that support person to support mom, because I want it to be a time when they can bond. Like with Nicole, I tried to show Brent things that he could do to help support her and help her find comfort. I'm not there at all to take the place of that main support person. I am there to help them as well.
Yeah, that's something I really liked, is that you were trying to help Brent, my husband, help me, and you wanted Brent to be the main one helping me, and that made it a lot more memorable for us and brought us a lot closer together because of all the things he was learning from you to help me.
Yeah, and that is an emphasis that I really like to focus on is I feel really comfortable helping dads.
And I know Brent felt comfortable with you too. It wasn't weird in any way for him.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Well, I guess just to wrap it up that, I then stay with the woman all the way through the birth. And then I remain with her for an hour or two postpartum to help establish breastfeeding, just to help just kind of in that first little time. And then I follow up with a phone call within the first few days and then a visit within the first couple weeks at home just to help make sure. So that's kind of the whole scope of what I do as a doula.
And you told me that there are some doulas that'll even, like if the mom needs you to come and stay at their house for like a week to help clean or provide meals or something like that. Didn't you say if they don't have their mom or their spouse or someone to help, then you would be willing to do that too?
Yeah, so that's actually talking about specifically a postpartum doula. So what I described earlier is my role as a birth doula. A postpartum doula would be hired like on an hourly rate to come in during the postpartum period. Yeah, like a lot of times people with multiples or a single mom, or yeah, like if dad's got a really busy work schedule or project that he's got going on, or if it's just too overwhelming for whatever reason. As a postpartum doula, it's just wide open of what I could do. I help offer breastfeeding support. I help in the home with other children or cleaning or just anything to help mom be able to focus on herself and baby.
And don't you think even if someone didn't want a doula during the birth, it would be good for them to have one ready for afterwards, just in case they're experiencing postpartum depression and don't have a good support system? Then they have someone that can come help out when they're feeling really overwhelmed and stressed.
Yeah, to be honest, even though still the number of people that hire birth doulas is pretty low, I feel like the knowledge and the number of people that hire a postpartum doula is even smaller. And I feel like that is a resource that has not been tapped into. It really could help a lot of women if they realize that there are women out there trained and ready to come in and help them during that time. Because I feel like, yeah, women get left kind of alone, like on an island by themselves after birth. People think this is just going to happen naturally. They're going to know what to do. They're going to be able to take care of themselves and their baby. And meanwhile, they're sleep deprived and their nutrition is off and their hormones are way off. And all these things that really, when you look historically, women rallied around other women at that time. And we kind of have lost that. And a postpartum doula, I think, is a great asset. Matter of fact, if you're looking for a unique and really helpful baby shower gift for somebody, research and find a postpartum doula in your area and give her an hour or two, or group together with some other people and give her a few hours of postpartum doula help. I mean, that's huge.
What is a typical hourly rate for that?
It really varies by area, but in my area, which is Central Illinois, like $25 to $35 an hour.
That's not so bad.
No, it's really not.
Well, and I was thinking that a lot of people don't talk about enough how hard it is after the baby comes home. And so then so many women think that they're a failure because they should have it all together just like everyone else. And I think maybe they would be ashamed to think that they need some extra help or need to pay someone to come help them with that, when really I'm sure everybody could benefit from that.
Right. And I think, normalizing the fact that we don't need to bounce right back into life. Like, we need to take time. We're becoming a new person when we become a mom, right? Not completely new. We're still ourselves, but we're taking on this new persona of being a mother and learning to deal with taking care of a newborn and all these things. It's really a time where women need to feel supported.
So I was going to ask you, what are some common misconceptions about doulas?
Well, doulas are hired often by people who are interested in natural childbirth. But I think that it scares some people off. Like, oh, you're going to think poorly of me if I get an epidural, or you're going to think bad of me if I want to take pain medication, or if I'm going to go to the hospital. And that's not really true. A doula is there to help educate and support a woman in whatever choices she makes. And I don't feel like there's any one right way to give birth, except that the one right way to give birth is to be educated and make informed decisions.
Yeah. Okay, I now wanted to move on to the next part. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with Kate. What you said at the beginning was how it went. You came over to talk about our birth plan. I thought that I had to get another C-section because I had already had one with my first baby. And you told me that I should look into a second opinion from another doctor. And you helped me find an OB office that was a lot better for me.
Right.
They supported the VBAC experience and they said, yeah, you can try for a VBAC. So that was a really exciting moment for me. So on the day that I went into labor with Kate, I remember it was a Sunday morning and I labored all day long. I went on a walk. I was still having the contractions. Later that night, you came over and did hip dips. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And early the next morning, you came over and you were doing other exercises with me, helping me through the contractions. And I think after a few hours, it did get to the point where we were ready to go to the hospital. And we went, but then they just ended up sending me home because I wasn't progressing enough. And then at home, you were talking me through contractions again. And so I was having really bad back labor, and I had gotten to the point where I needed you to help me get to my happy place. I remember lying down on the floor in my living room, trying to breathe through my contractions, and you were just speaking really gently, trying to help me go to that place mentally. So I wanted to ask you, what do you usually advise your clients as far as finding that happy place, and how do you help them get there mentally?
Well, during one of the prenatal visits, I usually bring up that it's good to have a place or a time or a memory that you can identify as a time that you remember being really happy and peaceful. And then once mom has identified that, then I help her think about how it applies to all the senses. And then I encourage her to communicate that to her support person. So it's her husband there at home, then to tell him what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it smells like, all those things.
So then he can get her there if you're not available.
Right. And so that everybody on the team, that intimate team, knows. And usually I found in later labor is when a woman especially needs to kind of get away from the pain. It's just too much to work through, and it's time to just kind of separate yourself from it. And if you can go to that happy place in your mind, then you can just leave your body doing the work, and you can be somewhere else, and you can find that peace and contentment amidst really painful contractions. So then if I and the support person know what it smells like, sounds like, feels like, all of those things, then I can say, can you hear the ocean waves crashing on the sand? Do you feel the warm sun on your skin? Can you smell the salty air? Do you hear, I remember one woman that I was with, it was the beach, but she was specific that she didn't want to, she liked the idea of the birds, but she was like, but not pooping on me. I'm like, nope, none of these birds are pooping on you. We can hear the birds and be like, whatever it is, because this is just like ideal world, right? But it's important, to have like all of those things and just helping her to just be in that peaceful place.
Yeah, and when you did that for me, I really did feel like I was there. So some people listening will know what this place is and some won't, but mine was the celestial room at the temple, and you were telling me that there are happy people there. They're all dressed in white, and it's a peaceful, calm feeling, no distractions or anything stressing them out. And especially when you said there are happy people there, I could feel the presence of some of my ancestors, and I could feel my mom's mom. I could feel her presence there helping me through that experience. And that was so powerful. There are no words to describe how powerful that was, that you were able to paint the picture for me so clearly that I was able to feel like I was actually there and that they were actually there with me. That was amazing.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool because I had no idea that that's what I was creating for you. And that's exactly what I want to be able to do as a doula, is just support, because really ultimately you did that. Like you can say that I guided you there, but really it was within your own. I mean, I didn't know that about your grandmother or any of that, but I just want to be able to be a tool to help you find the strength within yourself and find it within you to be able to do these things. This very challenging work of labor.
Right. So why then do you think that a woman's mental state during her labor has such an impact on her ability to get through those contractions peacefully?
Oh, that's huge. And it's all the reasons. It's biological, it's psychological, it's emotional. I mean, we're learning more and more about the brain and how connected the brain is to our well-being in ways physically that we didn't know, like biologically, chemically. And when we're in a peaceful, calm mental state, specifically in birth, then all the right hormones can do all the things that need to happen to help that baby drop down into the birth canal and the uterus to contract and the cervix to open up. Like all those things happen from chemical responses in the body. And when we have a calm mental state, then those things can happen better. They can happen faster, they can happen more effectively, and that's biologically and that's psychologically. I mean, I think you always use the example with women. I talk about adrenaline, right, as the fight or flight hormone, and in mammals other than humans, that fight or flight hormone can actually stop them from giving birth when they are in danger. When a cat feels like they're in danger or their babies are going to be in danger, they can actually stop, move to a safer location, and then continue to birth their kittens. Now, I've not ever seen that happen where we can stop it as humans, but that same hormone can slow down birth. And so when we feel that stress, we need to work through those fears and the stress so that we don't inhibit the natural process. So when we're calm and peaceful, we're allowing that natural birth process to happen. And sometimes in the beginning, you can welcome the pain. You can be like, oh, this is good. This is productive. This is doing what I want. But it gets to a point where it's too overwhelming. And that's really when you have to, when it's better to like escape it, go to a happy place, find ways to remain calm in spite of the fact that, this pain is coursing through your body.
And that pain means that it's moving along, right?
Right.
the process.
Right. And really, the more and more I learn, the more I learn that things that I do as a doula, it doesn't lessen the pain, but it lessens the perception of pain. Like there's been studies and evidence that, women that are kind of employing some of these natural pain remedies later, they may or may not rate their pain differently in the moment, but later when they look back, their perception of the pain is that it was less.
Which it wasn't as small as what they're remembering.
Right.
It's just a coping mechanism of the brain.
Right. And I think it's just, yeah, when you think of things in a more positive light, more positive, more empowering, like, wow, I did that. I mean, it's similar to running a marathon. So I haven't run a full marathon, but I've run half marathons, and why do I do it? Why do I put myself through that? Well, because it's exhilarating.
Girl, I do not know. Just kidding.
When I finish, like, wow, I just did that. And on mile 10, 11, 12, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. Like, what on earth possessed me to want to do this? But then when I finish and I've done it, it's like, wow, look what I just did. Look what my body just did.
Yeah. So then would you say that people can get to that positive thinking during the experience so that they can think that the pain is less than it actually is while it's happening instead of just after?
Yeah. I think the perception of the pain can be lessened. Yeah.
So going back to my experience, you were trying to help me labor at home through the night, and I was really exhausted. And I think I just couldn't really handle it anymore. So we decided to go to the hospital, and then they let us walk around some more. And so I went into labor Sunday morning. This was Tuesday morning, and I still hadn't slept.
Yeah.
I was so tired. And you were awesome because you weren't really sleeping unless I was.
Right.
Which I hardly did at all. So I don't know how you did that. And that back labor was the worst pain I've ever felt. That back labor is like death.
Yeah.
But you guys, you helped me so much because if you hadn't been there, then Brent wouldn't have known where to push. You had him push in on my hips and you had him push on my back, and you were helping with those things too.
Yeah.
And every time I got a contraction, it was in my back. And you and Brent, you would each grab one of my hands and have your other hand on my back at the same time. And Brent joked that you guys were each going to have strong muscles on that one arm.
I remember that.
But eventually I couldn't handle it anymore. I think it was like late afternoon Tuesday, like 2 p.m. or something. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I was tired. And I remember feeling like I would feel like a failure if I decided to get an epidural, because I learned that the less intervention you have, the more likely you are to be able to do a VBAC. And so I was really sad, and I thought Charity's going to be so disappointed. But you weren't at all. You really reassured me, like, you've done so well. Look how far you've come and how much we've tried and how much we've done. And we were even doing extra exercises with the midwives and you at the hospital too. We really did everything.
Yeah, we were really trying. And honestly, every woman can decide when is the right time to have an epidural. But in my opinion, when it's been long and drawn out, I mean, that is when, in my mind, an epidural is really what you should do, because you just can't do it. You just can't keep going and can't keep going. And you don't know why things aren't progressing. And, sometimes if you're just so exhausted, you need to rest. And so, yeah, it was the right choice because it was your choice. But also, yeah, it had been a long, long haul.
And some women need an epidural to get things going. Like sometimes it's the epidural that gets things moving along, right?
Well,
no.
that might be the perception. My guess would be it's more about like the woman hasn't been able to relax until she has the epidural. So I think there are other methods to achieve achieve the same result.
Yeah. So once I got the epidural and things hadn't progressed for a while, that's when the doctors came in and told me that because I had a C-section before, they were worried about the strain of everything that was happening and how it would put a strain on my uterus and stuff. And so they decided to have me have a C-section. And before that, I got a blessing from one of the residents was a member of our faith, and he gave me a priesthood blessing, and we were hoping that he would say that I would be able to have a VBAC, but he didn't. He said something like that I would be able to have peace with whatever outcome happened. And I did feel that peace, and I felt good about the effort that we made because it was very hard. And I felt like, okay, if I've done all of this and tried this hard, then it must be Heavenly Father's will for me to have another C-section because there's nothing more I can do. And so I did have a C-section, and they actually told me afterwards that my tailbone sticks forward a little bit and keeps the baby from being able to descend. And that was the moment that I realized that God made me this way. And so he must have intended it to be this way for me. Even though I tried to have a VBAC, and I'm glad that I tried that. And I'm glad that you were there to help me try that. But I realized that this was my plan. This was God's plan for me. And something that I was thinking about recently that helped me come to terms with this even more, because it's something that I a lot of times have to go back and address again inside, is I was thinking about Christ's birth story when he was born. And I was thinking about how Mary, I mean, obviously, she didn't expect to have a baby being a virgin. So that's one way that her birth story was not what she expected or wanted. I mean, she probably wanted it once she realized, but what she wanted when she was a little girl and expected and hoped for and thought about. And she also, I'm sure, did not expect to give birth in a stable among animal poop and animals and hay, and lay her baby in a trough with hay, And I just was thinking about all the things she probably didn't expect to have to travel really far, being so far along in her pregnancy. And there are just so many things about that birth story. And soon after he was born, they had to leave and hurry to Egypt. It's just so many things that I realized she didn't expect any of that either, or probably deep down want it, but it's what happened. And what more beautiful birth story is there? And so I just wanted to say to our listeners that even though you may not have the exact experience that you've always wanted, for me, it was so hard to come to grips with the fact that I would have to have C-sections, just because I've always wanted a really big family, and having C-sections can prevent that. And I just decided that this is what Heavenly Father wanted for me for some reason. And that happened to Mary too, not like I'm at her level at all, but that comforted me to know that Christ's birth story wasn't the perfect thing either. And it was still okay. And it was beautiful and wonderful. And actually, I've noticed that so many people are comforted by the fact that Christ was born in such a lowly setting as a stable, and it makes us feel so wonderful that the greatest person who ever lived was born in such lowly circumstances. And so having an experience that's different from what you wanted doesn't have to mean that you're any less of a person or any less of a mother.
And something that I like to remind people, and I wish that there had been more people reminding me of this when I had my C-section with my third baby, is that it's okay to love your baby, but not necessarily love the way your baby came.
I like that.
That's okay. You don't have to be completely happy with the way everything happened. I mean, it happened. And, like we've talked about, I mean, it is best to be educated and supported, but that doesn't even happen for everybody. And that doesn't mean that, it has to have been a horrible experience for the rest of their life. You can say, well, that happened. I had a C-section and I didn't love that, but I can move forward and love my baby.
Yeah. I was able to accept it because I realized that's what God wanted for me, and he knows better than I do. And that was something that helped it be more peaceful for me.
Yeah.
And I've even realized now that because I probably won't be able to have all the kids that I want, we may end up adopting. And that to me is amazing. Just that I may not have thought of doing that necessarily before. And now it's something that I think about all the time.
Yeah, everybody's path is so different, and it's most of the time not the way that we thought it would go or wanted it to go, but it can still be a beautiful path.
Yeah. So last thing I'll say about the experience with Kate is that you waited during the whole C-section, which took a while. But you waited during all of that, and then you waited and helped make sure I could breastfeed and stuff. And I just thought it was amazing because it was at least one. I know it was after midnight, and you were there helping me make sure everything went well, that I felt good, that breastfeeding was going okay before you went home and finally were able to rest. So I wanted to ask you, we did talk about this a little bit, but just how these thinking techniques that you use to help me and that you've used to help other women, how those can help our listeners, even if they're not going through any of these birth experiences or, just in their everyday lives.
Yeah. One of the things that I have women do when I'm working with them when they're pregnant is to practice relaxation. And I say, even if it's just only 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes 2 times a day, just, like sit in a quiet place. And it's really, call it meditation, call it mindfulness, call it relaxation. I think it's powerful for anybody to practice relaxation, practice being in a place where you can clear your mind and be
It could even
quiet.
be in prayer too, right?
Right. Yeah. It really looks like what you want it to look like. Honestly, I find it really effective for me if I take some time before prayer like that. So if I take some time for quiet reflection, relaxation, clear my mind, and then pray, I'm in a lot better place to pray.
You have a lot more meaningful prayer.
Yeah, a lot more meaningful, a lot more connected prayer. But that relaxation is healthy for our bodies, it's healthy for our minds, and it's healthy to just
Be still.
yeah, just to be still. So there's that aspect. Other parts of what I talk to women in pregnancy can help people too. But that's a big one. I think that's a big one because it's just like other practice, whether it's dance practice or athletics practice or music practice or whatever, the more you do it, the more natural it feels. So if you practice that relaxation, then you'll be able to relax better. But so relaxation is a huge one. I think that can help everybody, pregnant or not.
Yeah. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is you told me that you believe women who feel empowered in birth feel empowered in motherhood. So I was hoping you could tell me a little more about that.
Well, I feel like just like that feeling that I talked about after my half marathons, like, wow, I did that. I can do anything. You feel that feeling of invincibility, even if it's just for a moment, just that feeling of empowerment. Like, look at what my body can do. Look at what Heavenly Father can do through me. Look at what my partner and I can do together. Just all of those things. It just strengthens ourselves, strengthens our bond with our partner, strengthens our bond with our Heavenly Father, that you can move forward with that positive energy and just even be able to reflect back like, wow, I think even in a moment of like, I don't know how I'm going to handle this little toddler temper tantrum, even if you can be like, oh yeah, but I handled those contractions in labor, so I can do this. I can do it.
Yeah. So what about women who are listening now who are dealing with the tantrum, but they didn't handle it?
Sure.
They weren't able to have a good positive birthing experience in their eyes. So what can they do now?
Yeah, so that depends on how severe of an experience. I would really honestly encourage if women have had a really negative experience in birth, I recommend some therapy. PTSD from a traumatic birth experience is real.
Yeah.
If you had a traumatic birth experience and you haven't been able to process it, find someone to process it with. And maybe that's just your partner, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a doula, maybe it's a therapist.
And for me, even just journaling has helped a lot.
Yeah. And whatever level it is, talking it through with somebody is helpful. And this is a lot easier said than done. But don't be afraid to find out that there could have been a better way. Don't beat yourself up about it. You did what you could when you knew what you did. And I've learned things that I'm like, oh, wow, I could have done that differently in that birth, and maybe I would have had a better outcome. I actually had a pretty traumatic experience on my first birth. Even though coming out of it, I felt very positive and I felt like there were positive aspects of it. But, I look back and I now know things I could have done differently. And I think don't be afraid to learn that, I made the choices that I made then based on what I knew then and the support I had then. But it's okay to look back and say, oh, I've now learned this aspect about birth or labor or delivery. And had I known that then, I would have made a different choice and maybe I would have had a different outcome. And I think that's part of processing it. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a therapist myself, but I think don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to find out that, because I think sometimes to feel okay about our choices, we want to make sure, we want to feel like it was the choice we should have made. And sometimes we make wrong choices. That's just what life, or not wrong choices. That's not the right way to say it. But, we just make choices again based on what we knew at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think all of life is that way. That
Yeah.
I don't know if other people do this as much as I do, but I look back on things I've done in the past all the time. It doesn't even have to be terrible, terrible things, just like little things that I said to someone or
Yeah.
things like that, where I'm like, I wish I would have done it like this. And you do have to remember that if you were then the person that you are now, you would have done it better or in a way that you wished you could have.
Right. But at the same time, would you be the person you are today if you hadn't done it the way you did it?
Right. That's what helps you learn.
Yeah, that's what life is. Life is about learning and growing. And so you can move forward feeling empowered if you process through some of the emotions from a traumatic birth, whatever level of traumatic birth that you had, or just a birth that, you just aren't really that happy about. And certainly, like if you're in the place where you're going to have another birth, then I would definitely encourage you to look into what happened and why it happened the way it did. And if there's things that you can do to help have it happen differently this time, and hire a doula.
Yeah.
Or at least talk to one about what they could offer you, and keeping an open mind and educating yourself will help you to have an empowered birth.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you talking with me about this. I really enjoyed it. And I just wanted to say to our listeners, if you want to contact Charity with any questions, I'll include her contact information in the show notes. And I'm also going to include information about how to find a doula in your area. But really, you should just fly Charity out to wherever you are because she's that amazing.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Nicole.
thanks so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this discussion, and thank you all for listening.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. If it resonates with you, the greatest compliment you could give is to share it with a friend who might benefit from it as well. Check out A Difference for One on Instagram for additional content. And if you have any questions, comments, a topic you'd like to hear about, or if you'd be interested in a free mini coaching session, send an email to adifferenceforone@gmail.com.